Take a closer look at this chart. What do you see? The numbers tell a compelling story, one that reflects a growing desire for change. In the UK, 55% of voters now believe the relationship with the EU should become closer. And they're not alone. Across major EU nations like Germany, Poland, Spain, and Italy, there's a clear majority calling for the same, a stronger UK-EU partnership. So what if the UK's biggest mistake post-Brexit wasn't leaving the EU, but not making a move to come back? This chart isn't just about numbers, it's about shifting attitudes. After nearly a decade of economic turmoil and political isolation, both sides of the channel grapple with a critical question. Is it time for a bold reset in UK-EU relations? In today's video, we'll break down the economic and political implications of this growing sentiment. So, is the UK ready for a new chapter of cooperation with the European Union, or is isolation still the way forward? Let's find out. In October 2023, around 20,000 protesters took to the streets of London, urging leaders to rethink Brexit and consider reopening talks with Brussels. According to a YouGov poll, 62% of Britons share the sentiment that Brexit has not worked. As of 2023, the economic fallout has been severe. Food prices alone have skyrocketed by 25% since January 2021, adding a hefty $8.7 billion per household. Imagine being part of the 50% of low-income families who, rather than sit down for a comfortable meal, are skipping it entirely simply to make sure their children aren't going hungry. The promise of Brexit, once so full of hope, has dimmed in the face of these undeniable challenges. To put things into perspective, just look at Britain's GDP growth since 2019 compared to the likes of the United States and Canada. Now take a step back. When Brexit was first pitched, the argument was about reclaiming sovereignty. The allure of taking back control was compelling enough to make history. It tapped into a deep desire for national self-determination and freedom from what was seen as the overreach of Brussels. The promise was simple. Britain would regain full control over its laws, borders, and trade, free from EU constraints. But as the dust settled and reality set in, the complexities of that control became clearer. It's no longer about lofty ideals, it's about survival. Businesses haven't been spared either. Research from the Centre of European Reform found that investment in 2020-2021 was 23% lower than it would have been if the UK had stayed in the EU. Even prominent Brexiteers are voicing doubts. Nigel Farage, once a leading advocate for leaving the EU, has admitted Brexit hasn't delivered the economic benefits promised. Pro-EU activist Fernie Oluwale put it bluntly: the idea of making Brexit work doesn't hold the same appeal anymore. While hunger creeping into homes and bills piling up, the real question looms: can Brexit survive when the people can't even afford to eat? While that is a more pressing issue that Britain needs to deal with, there are other ways in which Brexit has affected Britain's economy as a whole. 2020 was a game-changing year. The UK officially parted ways with the European Union, but it was also the year a global pandemic and energy crisis shook the world. With these crises colliding, it's been nearly impossible to pinpoint the true effects of Brexit on the UK economy. But now, fresh data is starting to break through, revealing some eye-opening and, at times, shocking economic impacts. Leaving the single market and customs union in 2021 introduced new rules, paperwork, and checks for companies trading with the EU. This raised concerns about the future of the $690 billion trade relationship with the UK's closest partner. Now, exports took an initial hit, but they've since bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. Still, the big question remains: could trade have exploded even more without Brexit? A 2023 survey from the British Chambers of Commerce revealed that over half of 500 companies were still battling with the new trade system. Small exporters are feeling the squeeze, with some businesses potentially pulling out of the market altogether. Imports, the struggle continues. While volumes have recovered, the cost of importing everyday items like tomatoes and potatoes from the EU has surged, with prices rising as much as 6% before inflation even kicked in. Sure, Brexit gave a $6 billion boost to local food producers, cutting out some competition. But zoom out, and the broader picture of Brexit's impact is far from rosy. During the pandemic, global trade took a major hit, but most G7 nations have bounced back, except for the UK. This stark difference becomes even clearer when you look at the chart below. A deep dive into the data reveals that the UK's imports and exports, when compared to its GDP, have grown far slower since late 2018 than in other G7 countries. This trend is seen not just in trade with the EU, but with the rest of the world as well. Since leaving the EU, the UK has been busy signing trade deals, 71 by the year 2023, a number that seems like swift progress on the surface. Yes, the UK has signed trade deals with countries like Australia and New Zealand, and at first glance, it seems like a triumph. But dig a little deeper and you'll find something less dazzling. These deals aren't new at all, at least not in the way that they were marketed. They're, for the most part, copies of the agreements the UK had when it was still part of the EU. In other words, there's little new ground gained, and the benefits they're expecting to trickle in slowly, taking years to show any significant boost to trade. To add to the complexity, they've sparked fears among UK farmers who worry about increased competition and potential losses. By 2023, the UK was still locked in trade talks with India and Trans-Pacific partners, while these negotiations were taking longer than expected. But when it comes to heavyweights like the US and China, the situation was far less promising. Trade deals with these giants remained stubbornly out of reach, leaving the UK's global trade ambitions looking more like a work in progress than a reality. Ultimately, as the UK secures new trade deals, a bigger challenge looms on the horizon, one that could determine the future of its economy. What fuels an economy's growth? It's the sound of factories buzzing with productivity, workers sharpening their skills, and businesses pouring money into cutting-edge technology. But in post-Brexit Britain, business investment has stalled. This change is reflected in this graph. It's clear that post-2016 investments have taken a hit for Britain. Even before Brexit, though, the UK wasn't setting records in this area, but analysis from the UK and a changing Europe showed a stark reality. If pre-referendum trends had continued, investment could be a staggering 25% higher than it was by 2024. So what's holding businesses back? Economists are divided, but one recurring theme is uncertainty. The endless wrangling over Brexit, from red tape to the unresolved Northern Ireland Protocol, has created a foggy outlook that makes companies hesitant to commit. High-profile voices like Sir Richard Branson have bluntly said that the cost of Brexit bureaucracy makes the UK a tougher sell for investors. Brexit supporters, however, push back hard. Groups like Briefings for Business claim these figures are exaggerated, insisting there's no concrete evidence tying Brexit to the investment slump. But the reality is harsh. Without a surge in investment, the UK risks spiraling into a cycle of low productivity and stagnating growth. But it's not just businesses that are feeling the pinch. With the end of free movement and the introduction of a points-based immigration system, industries that once thrived on a steady flow of workers were now facing major challenges. Tim Martin, boss of Wetherspoons, has been vocal about his support for Brexit, but now admits the UK needs more foreign workers to fill the gaps. The labour shortages are driving up costs and leaving customers with higher bills. While some commentators argue that these constraints could force businesses to invest in upskilling their workforce, the reality remains that many industries are scrambling to cope. In the financial services sector, 7,000 jobs have been lost, far fewer than the 70,000 originally feared. But it's still a stark reminder of the challenges that Brexit continues to throw at the UK. Now, as business investment stalls in post-Brexit Britain, the economic landscape isn't the only thing going through a massive shift. The political landscape of EU-UK relations is shifting just as dramatically. Europe's political landscape has shifted dramatically, with key moments in 2022 and 2024 marking a new chapter for the continent. If there was any doubt before, it's now clear. Europe is entering a new era. Of course, as the landscape shifts, UK and EU voters are questioning everything they thought they knew, especially about their relationship with each other. What's especially interesting is that while political leaders on both sides are still cautiously navigating these waters, public opinion has already moved ahead. A 2024 poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations, conducted after the 2024 US election, revealed a striking shift. The majority of voters in key EU countries, including Germany, Poland, a significant portion in Italy, Spain and France, are open to the EU making economic compromises with the UK to strengthen security ties. In the UK, even more surprising, a majority, those who voted for Brexit in 2016, were now willing to accept free movement if it meant stronger economic ties with the EU. Perhaps even more telling when it comes to their future in areas like economic growth, migration and security, many Brits now look to the EU more than the US as their most important partner. This sentiment can be seen right here in this poll conducted by YouGov and Data Praxis. Now, 8 years since the Brexit referendum, the world has changed in ways few could have predicted by 2024. Back in 2016, when British voters decided to leave the EU, Barack Obama was still in office, the UK's relationship with China was at its peak, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine was yet to unfold. Many Brexiteers dreamt of the UK as a nimble, free-trading nation unshackled from EU bureaucracy and ready to capitalise on an open global market. On the EU side, while the decision was met with disappointment, some leaders privately felt relieved to see the back of a nation often seen as a difficult, reluctant partner. But a 2024 YouGov poll showed that the landscape has dramatically shifted. Across every country surveyed, the consensus is clear. EU-UK relations should move closer, not further apart. By 2024, the war in Ukraine, growing tensions with China, and the looming possibility of another Trump presidency forced both Brits and Europeans to rethink their relationship. In today's shifting geopolitical climate, it's clear that a reset isn't just a good idea, it's become a must. On top of that, the call for a reset in EU-UK relations isn't just one-sided, it's a growing movement picking up steam on both sides of the channel. A 2024 poll reveals a shocking change. People from both the UK and the EU across all political stripes are united in one bold idea. It's time to strengthen those bonds and get closer than ever before. In the UK, a solid 55% of voters believe the relationship should become closer, while only 10% want to see it grow more distant. When it comes to the economy, the message from Brits is loud and clear. The EU is seen as a far more crucial partner than the US. This aligns with the reality that the UK conducts nearly 3 times more trade with European nations than with its American counterparts. Our poll reflects this sentiment, not just across the general population, but also among pro-Brexit voters. 32% of them agree that the EU is more important for the UK's economy, while only 13% look to the US to ensure British jobs. However, the picture shifts when it comes to foreign policy. Here, public opinion is more divided. While 33% of Brits view the EU as the most vital partner for the UK's global influence, 30% feel the US is more critical in this regard. What's truly surprising, though, is the shift in security priorities. Despite the UK's strong ties to NATO, more Brits, around 40%, believe the relationship with the EU is more important for national security than the transatlantic alliance with the US, which only 33% prioritise. Of course, this push for closer ties signals a major shift in the EU strategy, sparked by changing global dynamics and rising security concerns. The Trump effect is reshaping how the EU views its economic and security priorities. As the conflict in Ukraine drags on and Russia strengthens its military capabilities, European leaders are beginning to brace for a future where they may have to defend themselves with less American support. This reality has driven many European countries to boost their defense budgets above the NATO 2% of GDP target, while the European Commission explores innovative ways to redirect funding towards military needs. Amid these challenges, European voters are adjusting their expectations and changing their views on the UK. Once wary of British cherry-picking from the EU's membership benefits, a growing number of Europeans are open to closer ties with the UK, especially in the areas of research and security cooperation. Majorities in Poland, Spain, Germany, and Italy now support granting the EU access to EU research programs, particularly as a way to deepen security collaboration. This builds on the UK's return to the EU's Horizon programme under a 2023 Windsor framework, showing a willingness to find common ground despite the past challenges. But the drive for cooperation doesn't stop there. As of 2024, a significant number of EU citizens were now open to more generous deals, even supporting the idea of giving the UK special access to parts of the single market in exchange for a stronger security partnership. In Germany and Poland, the support is overwhelming, with majorities backing this idea. Even in France, a traditionally more sceptical nation, 41% of respondents favour granting the UK this special access. Looking ahead, Britain has a real chance to reshape its place in the world with more support for closer ties with the EU. With 45% of Brits backing a fresh start in UK-EU relations, there's a big potential for economic growth and stronger security. By joining Europe's research efforts and teaming up on global issues like climate change and migration, Britain can boost its economy and play a key role in shaping global policy.